Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I am slowly easing myself back into the realm of more serious shows. I'm usually left searching for a little extra darkness, so I didn't think I would ever get burnt out on them, but I sort of did, so here we are. Jinsei was lighthearted, but there wasn't much substance to it. I felt like I found the perfect happy medium this month with Castletown Dandelion. And I don't plan to spoil everything. There are just a few characters I'd like to talk about in detail. The story follows the 9 children of the Sakurada family. In many ways, they're just like any other family, except for the fact that their father is the current king of the country. He wanted them to live as normal a life as possible, so they live in a regular house in the middle of town, and have to share rooms because there are so many of them. They go to the local public high school, they do chores around their house, and draw lots for who gets what each week. The real difference is that they're like celebrities to the townspeople, and their fathers installed about 200 surveillance cameras around town for security. This last fact is pretty much the bane of his 4th child's existence. Princess Akane is painfully shy. Painful because she squeals and panics anytime she runs into strangers or one of the cameras turns her way. The story starts with the king announcing that an election to crown his successor will be held at the end of the school year, once his eldest daughter graduates. Akane decides to fight for that title so she can ban all the surveillance around town and live a quiet life. We can get into the realisticness of that dream later. I mentioned that the next show would have a little more magic. And it does. It may not seem like it would fit into this premise exactly, but each sibling also has a unique special ability. It's considered to be like a mark of royalty. Akane can manipulate gravity, which occasionally means she lifts really heavy objects, but usually we see her using it to fly. But honestly, it doesn't feel right to talk about Akane like she is the one main protagonist. Every summary I've read would make you think so, and she does narrate most of the first few episodes, but it's really about all of the Sakurada siblings. They all get about an equal amount of screen time, and their own episodes focused on each of them. And most importantly, they're all likable and endearing in their own ways. They all get along, which was really refreshing, but the upcoming election is a competition, and over the course of the series they all had moments that made me want to root for them. And actually, as far as favorites go, I wouldn't say Akane is even in my top 3. Her older brother Shu is easygoing and very easy to like. He's not really ambitious for the throne, but it's kinda just in his nature to look out for everyone around him. He's also a little dense sometimes and can be adorably oblivious, but it's actually his twin sister Kanade who stood out the most to me. She is quite literally the only Sakurada sibling with even a whisper of an edge to her. They're all just so nice. She contrasts him by being the most ambitious to be chosen as the next king, which this show uses as a gender-neutral ruling term, it would seem, and comes across as a little manipulative because of it. The election is basically a popularity contest, and for Kanade, who's naturally a more serious, kinda cynical person, it's the most striking difference watching her put on her public face. You see it from all of them at times. They can all go from ordinary, bickering siblings one second to public figures the next as soon as they step out the front door. It's just a little more noticeable with Kanade. She goes that extra step to appear perfect. She feels like she has to be perfect, because her biggest competition, the oldest sibling, First Princess Aoi, is just so naturally gentle and thoughtful and responsible, and is consistently the most popular. But even when her smiles felt a little shady, it didn't make her immediately unlikable, just interesting. And the more we get to know Kanade, the clearer it becomes that she is kind and caring in her own right, just not perfect. But then none of them are. I'm not really going to talk about Aoi here, because her story has the strongest bearing on the overall plot, but she has her secrets too, and from the very beginning she seems a little unsure about this whole election. Where Kanade really cemented herself in as one of my favorites, though, was episode 6, where we finally learn her real motivations for becoming king. Kanade's special ability allows her to materialize just about anything. Its worth is just subtracted from her bank account, and even a royal princess has her limits. and the consequences for misusing her ability can be dangerous. She was trying to impress Akane one day, when she looked to be about 7 or 8, by building her a miniature castle in the park, but she goes over her funds in the process, and the castle crumbles down. Shu gets Akane out of there, but is injured himself. The damage to the muscles in his legs is severe enough that he'll never run again, even though he has no trouble walking. And Shu's special ability is that he can teleport, so he's the first to try and tell her that it's not a big deal, but Kanade is haunted by this. Teenage Shu never really seems to have any ambitions, but Kanade remembers him having dreams of being a soccer star. She wants to be king so she'll have access to the national budget, because surely that must be enough for her to develop a cure. It's incredibly immature and irresponsible. 2 things she's done her best to show the public she's not. And that particular dream feels like something he would have grown out of anyway. Shu doesn't even seem to remember it, but it was kind of refreshing to see the rest of her walls come down. And it was great to see her relax a little when she and Shu do have that confrontation, and she finally lets go of the past. Kanade actually has one of the best little scenes in the show. Near the end, as the siblings are all preparing their final speeches before the election, she has this little monologue about all her brothers and sisters' best qualities, how she wants the people to really know whoever they're voting for, and as I had also fallen in love with all the characters at this point, it really made me smile. Maybe I shouldn't have started with Kanade. As I'm not discussing Aoi, she has the strongest story, and it's kinda hard to follow that. But she wasn't the only one with a little darkness to her. Akane could get on my nerves. She was just a little too high-strung sometimes, but it was a pleasant surprise to find out she also had a bit of a dark backstory, a reason she's so shy. Akane also had an incident where her powers got a little out of control. The incident drew a crowd, and it was the first time the stares and whispers weren't stemming from admiration, and she's never forgotten it. The line between being a superhero and a villain can be very thin, and I was kind of impressed this show decided to address it, even briefly. It would have been very easy to gloss over it and present their powers as just another fun perk of being royal. But Castletown Dandelion had a lot of pleasant surprises. I took you pretty much all the way through Kanade's story and growth. I won't do that for all 9 siblings, but I do want to stress that they all had stories, a place in the bigger story. A surprise favorite of mine was Misaki. She's one of the middle daughters, kind of easily lost in the crowd, and that's exactly what she's insecure about, not having any particular strengths or talents of her own. Misaki's ability allows her to split herself into 8 people. The show describes it as making clones of herself, but that doesn't feel quite right to me, because they're not perfect copies of her. The other 7 represent 7 different sides of her personality, and some of my favorite scenes were ones where she's gathered them all together to try and puzzle through some problem. It's a fun sort of chaos. Most days, her clones spend their free time helping out the various school clubs they have the skills for, and Misaki's left feeling like she doesn't have any skills of her own, that she's just managing her clones' lives. But she's the one who's just naturally that helpful, and always making sure everyone has what they need. As they get closer to the election, she's often late to her speeches because she's run into some random person who needs help moving or cleaning up the park or whatever. There was something just kind of normal about Misaki. It made her easy to like and relate to. Her twin brother Haruka even tells her it's something that helps ground him when she's getting down on herself because of it. So yes, all the characters are great, and I could keep going on about each of them, but I'll restrain myself. Mostly. For now. There are just a few story things the critical part of my brain wants to address. It should be pretty clear why Akane's goal of becoming the most important public figure in order to no longer be in the public eye isn't all that logical. It's not the only thing about this premise that isn't strictly realistic. It's basically this unspoken thing that this story takes place in the most peaceful country in existence. The kids all seem to have a pretty good understanding of the responsibilities of a ruler, but no one has any serious concerns about the king handing over his title on a whim, especially when even the youngest of his children is being considered for the position. Haruka has a nice inner monologue where he considers that the king is doing this now, while they're still so young, because it gives them a chance to pinpoint their weaknesses and try to overcome them before they have to go out into the world as adults. And while sweet, I think it says a lot that he can so easily put his kids' well-being above his country's. You don't see a ton of their parents, but they get their own half of an episode that's a flashback dedicated to how they met. The king was already in his position himself as a teenager. Both of his parents died young, and he didn't have any siblings. It's questionable how much ruling he was actually doing at the time, because he fought to be allowed to attend a regular public high school. This is where he met his wife and fell in love with her big family, and things just went from there. He went on to really model his life, and the life he wanted his kids to have, after the experiences he had during this time. These roughly 10 minutes of flashback really told me all I needed to know about their parents, and endeared me to them, too. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought much of it if the parents just remained background figures throughout the whole story, so this was another of Castletown Dandelion's pleasant surprises. Like the writers knew just what I needed to round out a perfect experience with the cast, even when it wasn't something I was going to complain about if it wasn't added in there. I genuinely don't have much of anything to complain about with this series. Sometimes I feel like the critiques ground me a bit when I'm writing reviews, but I really don't have any reservations about recommending this one, especially because, as another of the happy surprises, the anime tells a complete story. I definitely wasn't expecting it to. A 12-episode anime with a manga that, even 5 years later, is still ongoing? Surely something was going to delay the election and leave us with some indefinite ending. But no, one of the Sakurada siblings is crowned at the end, and by that point I would have been happy with almost any one of them ending up on that throne. I really loved this show. I think it would have had to be just a little darker to be truly moving and cement itself in as one of my favorites, but that's something I'm willing to give up on that serious to lighthearted spectrum. If it had been more serious, I know I would have held its logic to harsher standards, so there's a give and take there. As it is, I enjoyed every episode of this show, especially during recent times. It's just refreshing. So I definitely suggest checking it out if you haven't already. I know I plan to look into the manga, if only because I want to see more of these characters. Thank you for watching.